Second case filed in the year 2010, suspected homicide of Daniel Baker, original investigator Detective Dorothea Padilla, who compiled statements below. Statement by Hubert Rod. It wasn't supposed to be Daniel. He wasn't supposed to die. It wasn't even supposed to be a person that died. It was supposed to be a bird. You see, it started with the death of a bird. A hummingbird, to be precise. I was out hiking one day, alone. I never did like hiking with another person. I go hiking real early in the morning. There's hardly anyone when I go. It helps me clear my head to be around so many trees and fresh air. The sweet smell of sap, even the smell of dog shit on the ground from owners who did not pick up, smelled good out there. The sun was just starting to rise, and I was gifted with the beautiful view of the forest. I could hear birds chirping around me. Next to the trees, lovely flowers were in bloom. And I saw a hummingbird, close to me, sucking the sweet nectar from a flower. The buzzing of its wings so loud to my ears. Seeing the bird reminded me of a story I was told as a child. It was said that if you were to kill a hummingbird and bury it, then the girl you liked would like you back. It was a stupid story, but so many people believed it. Adults as well. It was one of those superstitions passed down. I wasn't sure if I believed it, but many of my aunts and uncles believed in the mystical shits, and those things rubbed off on you. So maybe I believed. Just a little. I wish now more than anything I could go back and make myself stop from doing the thing I did. I saw the bird and snatched it as it sucked on the flower. Its wings beat furiously against my palms, but I held on tight. I always carried a switchblade in my pocket. I held the bird with one hand as I reached for the switchblade with the other. The bird made a sound of desperation as I sliced off its head. I made it quick. I doubt the bird felt much of it. I buried the body in the ground as the story said I should. As I said, I didn't believe in it much, but it was worth a try. I continued with my hike after and didn't think much of it. I came back home and everything was normal. My best friend, Daniel, lived next door. We had become friends when I first moved in 3 years back. I invited him over for some beer. I kept cool ones in the fridge. He would usually come over and we would shoot the shit. He asked me if I had gone hiking that morning. He knew my routine well. I sipped on my bottle as I told him I had. Daniel was a nice guy, but he was more of a couch potato, preferring to spend his days off sitting down watching TV. I didn't tell him about the bird. Daniel did not know that I believed in that stuff. He would probably laugh. Daniel asked me about the girl I liked. Her name was Sarah, by the way, and I had been pining after her since I moved here. She was a beautiful, blue-eyed, red-haired girl. Sweeter than sugar, but she had a wild side to her. She was the perfect mix. Nothing, I told him. There was nothing going on. We weren't close, only greeted each other when we passed. Daniel took a long swig of his bottle and kept his lips pressed on the top. I think you should just ask her. Worst comes to worst, you can just avoid her around town, Daniel had said. I grimaced at him. He knew I was shit when it came to confrontation. Daniel and I spent the rest of the day in comfortable company, drinking and watching TV. If I knew that it would be the last time we spent the day in that manner, I would have said something better to him. Told him he was my best friend and all that sappy shit. Instead, he left, back to his house. I went to sleep, or I tried to. I was dead tired and I practically collapsed on the bed. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard a noise. It sounded a bit far, like if it was coming from the hallway outside my room. It sounded like a bird. I couldn't distinguish what type of bird. It wasn't really loud, and I was sliding into the world of sleep, but I could hear the bird chirping out a song. I sat up abruptly, thinking maybe I had left my window open and a bird came in. I walked around the whole house, looking through any place a bird can hide, and there was nothing. The windows were closed tight. I waved it off, thinking that maybe I had dreamed it. I tried to go to sleep again, when that noise, that chirping noise, much closer this time, sounded. I couldn't help it. I stood up and looked around my house again. Everything was silent, no noise or movement. I kept thinking, where could it be hiding? I gave up, and for a third time, tried to go to sleep. I started to relax, closed my eyes, and felt myself leaving to the dreamlands when the sound of the bird chirping, this time right next to my ear, sounded. I bolted upright. The room was dark and I switched on the light as fast as I could, wanting to catch the damn bird at last. But there was nothing. The chirping had been close enough that I was able to distinguish what it was. It was a hummingbird. I knew it was. I had heard damn near enough of them to be able to tell birds apart. I knew it had to be in my room, so I closed the bedroom door and gave my room a quick look through. There was nothing, but if it was in here, I would hear it soon enough. I went back to bed, hoping that the bird would chirp again so I could catch it. I stayed awake a good hour or two and nothing, not one noise. I didn't realize when, but I had started drifting off to sleep when the chirping, loud and long, was close to me again, like if it was singing directly to me. I could hear the fluttering of its wings and I tried to clasp my hands around the space I heard the hummingbird in. When my hands closed around nothing and the sound stopped completely, it was impossible. I knew I had to hear the bird fly away from me, but as soon as I tore open my eyes, everything would stop. I couldn't sleep a damn wink that night. Every time I was close, that bird would come with its horrible song and not let me sleep. Daniel saw me the next day and told me I looked like shit as I drank coffee like mad. I didn't want to look like a damn pussy, but I asked him if I could sleep on his couch as he watched TV. I got to thinking that bird might not be able to follow me into Daniel's house, and if it did, then Daniel would see it and he would catch it for me. Daniel had thought it an odd request, but let me do it either way. I climbed onto his couch with a pillow and a blanket and settled myself as Daniel laughed at how weird I was being. I could hear the sound of the TV growing quieter and quieter as pleasant darkness settled over me. At last, I thought, when the screech of the bird jerked me awake. I looked around the living room, yelling at Daniel if he saw the bird. Daniel looked at me and laughed, saying I was probably dreaming because there was no bird here. I told him it was screeching and he just laughed again, saying that the only sound was coming from the TV. A bad feeling was settling in my stomach. It couldn't be that I was dreaming the bird because I was never able to get to sleep. The bird made sure of that. It let me get close to sleep before driving it away. It could not be just me that heard it. But Daniel was looking at me and shaking his head, telling me not to get spooked over bad dreams. I tried, really I did, to go to sleep. But that bird kept screeching its song in my ear, and Daniel, damn him, kept telling me to take some sleeping pills so that I would not be able to wake up for a few hours. But I knew that bird was here, and Daniel, he had to be seeing it. I looked over at Daniel and stared at him long and hard and asked him, "Are you sure you can't see the bird? It should be damn near my ear." And Daniel, with the straightest face possible, looked me right in the eye with a concerned look and said, "There is no bird here." Something didn't sit right with me. I left Daniel's house and just walked off to the town. I needed some fresh air, since I was not going to be able to sleep. I had not gone far when I found a nice park bench. My feet were going to take me much further. I felt as though I was going to topple over. I sat down and heard the birds, the hummingbirds. I turned around. There was a tree behind the bench, and it had 3 hummingbirds sitting on the branches staring at me. I yelled at them, told them to leave me alone, and they just stared back. My yell didn't even scare them off. They were quiet, perched on their branches. I grabbed a rock from the floor and threw it at one of them. It missed, but it came damn near it, and the bird didn't even stir or make an attempt to move. It just stayed on that branch staring at me. Its head cocked to the side as if it were studying me, and I had to leave, go far away from those damn birds. I ran back to my house and shut the door. I grabbed some earphones I kept in a drawer and put on soothing music while I made another attempt to go to sleep. Even if that bird showed up, I would not be able to hear it. I thought it was working. I felt myself drift off to sleep again when the damn chirping of the bird, a steady stream straight into my ear. I tore open my eyes and the chirping sound was still going strong. It was coming from my earphones. I looked down on my phone and saw that the video was playing hummingbird sounds. I never pressed that video. It was not even close to anything I would listen to. I couldn't see how the algorithm of the video site would automatically choose that video to play. I turned it off. I drank more coffee, almost giving up on sleep altogether, and did another thorough search of the house. There was nothing. No holes in the wall. Nothing that could hide the bird. I was going mad searching for the damn thing. At sundown, Daniel knocked on my door. He searched my face with a worried expression. "No sleep yet, I see," Daniel had told me, and I nodded. He came inside and had a bottle of sleeping pills. He told me I should take a couple. It would help me sleep, and I was tempted, very tempted. But when I looked down on Daniel's feet, something was wrong. Daniel's shoes were on backward. He had the left shoe on his right foot and right shoe on his left foot. I looked up at him confused and starting to notice other things I had missed. His shirt was inside out and backwards, and he was giving me a silly smile that was not Daniel's. Daniel was a couch potato, but he was not a slob. He kept himself neat and orderly. He would not come out of his house in such disarray. I pushed the pills away, telling him I did not need them. Daniel's smile faded, replaced with the same look of concern he had showed me earlier, and I almost took the bottle again, because that look was surely Daniel's. But then I caught sight of his shoes again and shook my head at him, telling him I was fine and that I would be able to sleep. Daniel had given me one more worried look before he left. I bolted the door shut behind him. I didn't know what I thought, but for a second I felt as if that person was not Daniel. I could feel it in my bones, and yet he had to be, didn't he? I went back to my room. It was dark, and I grabbed my hunting knife and clutched it in my hands as I tried to go to sleep. If that bird came back, I would slice it in the air. I was very good at that. I heard the bird, and I sliced at empty air. I ran around my room and heard the bird again. Finally, I heard the bird with my eyes open. It was outside. How it had gotten from my room to outside, I did not know, but it was there. I ran to my window and could see the bird moving around my yard. Its little wings took it to the yard next door, and I noticed that Daniel's window was cracked open. The bird squeezed itself inside Daniel's window, and I ran to his house, thumping madly on his door until he opened. It was almost midnight, and Daniel looked as if I had pulled him from sleep. His face paled when he saw the knife in my hands, and I tried to tell him that I had it for the bird, not for him. I would never hurt him, of course. I pushed him aside and ran into his house. I could hear him yelling at me from behind. I did not care. I needed to find that damn bird. He was here. He would come here after taunting me. I went to the window I saw the bird fly under and searched all around the room, throwing open doors like crazy. And there was nothing. I felt a deep rage within me. I needed that bird dead and gone. Why was it going to Daniel's house? Why, I thought, did Daniel pretend not to see the bird when it was clearly chirping in my ear? I turned to look at Daniel. He was still behind me, giving me a cautious look. He told me he called the police, that we were friends and all, but that I was acting crazy. I shook my head at him. "Why was the bird going to your house?" I asked, and he looked at me as if he did not know me. "What bird?" he said. "There is no bird." And then I saw it, the hummingbird fluttering behind him and landing on his shoulder. And then another, and another, 3 hummingbirds. And I pounced, feeling myself tear through their skin as Daniel thrashed below me. I had to throw him to the floor to get to the birds. It was the only way. The birds were on him, and I needed to get them. I stabbed and stabbed as one screeched, and then the other. They screeched, and I knew Daniel could not say he did not see them anymore. I was covered in their blood, inky red, but their feathers. I was sure I had a few stuck to the blood on me, but it was gone. Daniel had stopped thrashing below me, and I could not see the birds anymore. I ran to the light switch and saw Daniel's body on the floor, blood dripping out of him, his eyes open and glassy. He was deathly still, and there were no birds around him, no feathers, nothing. I was covered in blood, and it was not the bird's blood. It was Daniel's. I looked down at Daniel's shoes and shirt. His shirt was put on the right way, as were his shoes. This was Daniel, my Daniel, and I had murdered him. I ran outside and saw the flashing lights of a police siren. Daniel had told me he called the cops. I ran to them and told them what I'm telling you, that I murdered Daniel Baker, that he was inside, and that I needed help. I didn't want to murder Daniel, not him. He was my best friend. I wanted the police to handcuff me and take me away. Instead, they lured me into an ambulance that had come a few minutes after the police car. They made me lay back on a stretcher as they mopped up the blood I had on me and put it in bags. I felt my eyes go blurry, as they were doing something to me, stitching me up or something like that. I didn't know why. Daniel hadn't done anything to me. I felt myself pass out into the peaceful darkness at last and woke up in a hospital bed. I tried to find out what was going on, why I was there. I could see I had bandages on and I did not know why. Finally, I got my answers. Police went inside the house. There was no one in there. I was covered in blood, but the blood was all mine, no one else's. The police told me that neighbors called because they had seen me brandishing a knife, breaking into Daniel's house. But there was never a call made by Daniel. The knife had only my blood, and I was considered a risk to myself and put into a mental health facility for the time being. Do I hear the hummingbird? All the time. But they knock me out with so much sleep medication that I'm able to sleep through the loud chirps of the hummingbird. It's not a peaceful sleep, riddled with the hummingbird's song and its taunts. It was always here. I could hear it, but I have not seen it again. I'm afraid if I do, it might be the last thing I ever see. End of statement. Detective Dorothea Padilla's notes are as follows. Hubert Rodd spent a week in the hospital and upon being released was admitted into a mental health facility. He spent 3 weeks in the mental health facility when medics report that he died in the night from a heart attack. According to his medical records, he was healthy. No history of heart attacks in his family, and altogether very surprising that he died in this manner. Did he see the mockingbird at last? A mystery for sure. Daniel Baker was reported missing by his family a few days after Hubert Rodd was admitted into the hospital, and until now is classified as missing. However, I believe the most realistic classification for Daniel Baker is homicide victim. End of Detective Padilla's notes. Strange that Detective Padilla is choosing to classify this case as homicide when there's no body, and the only statement that points to the disappearance of Daniel Baker as being a homicide is from a man who was very clearly delusional. Even though there's no history of Hubert Rodd from suffering a psychosis before this, it is very clear that this is what he was suffering with before his death. I took the liberty of looking up Daniel Baker and saw that his family still has his missing person case open. Daniel Baker lived a normal life. He had a steady job, a house, and a good amount of savings in his bank. No apparent reason for him to disappear on his own, and the only foul play on his house was done by Hubert Rodd. However, police reports show that upon interviewing the neighbors, they note that someone did open the door when Hubert Rodd knocked that night. They were sure that the person they saw was Daniel Baker. However, they have admitted that they were some distance away and could have been mistaken. I'm going to change the label on this report as missing person instead of homicide, but we'll leave this statement since it is the only one for this case. If this case is reopened, there will have to be a much more thorough investigation on Daniel Baker and his disappearance. Why so much importance was given on one statement is beyond me. Seeing as Detective Padilla is no longer with us, I can no longer ask what her logic was behind this. Since this is still an active case, I will make a note that this case needs to be reviewed as soon as possible. End of Case 2.
Forgotten Creatures, a weekly horror podcast by Dark Nymph Productions, available on all podcast providers. For more information, follow us on Instagram at Forgotten Creatures Podcast.